Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome along to Glasgow Science Centre's Curious About Our Planet live Q&A. I'm delighted to be joined by our next guest, whom I'm sure many of you will be familiar with from her time in the Met Office and BBC Scotland, reporting the gloriously varied weather here that we get in Scotland and the rest of the UK. Nowadays, she's certainly kept very busy through her fantastic work with Loch Lomond and the Trosachs National Park as one of the board members through her extensive background in environmental science. I am, of course, referring to Heather the Weather, our guest today, Dr. Heather Reid. We're going to hear from Heather very shortly. And at the moment, I think our chat function is opened up on YouTube for you to ask any questions you might have from the get-go that we can ask Heather, and basically ask as many as we can throughout this Q&A session. But without any further ado, we've got a little warm-up Q&A that Heather has filmed for us earlier, so we'll go straight to that. And any follow-up questions you can think of, please, there's no limit on it. Put any questions you might have into the live chat. And like I said, we'll get asking them. But now over to Heather. Thank you very much.
Hi there, my name's Heather Reid, and for a long time I was a weather forecaster with the Met Office and the BBC, and now I promote science across the country, especially the science behind weather and climate change. When I was at school, I wanted to be a school teacher. Both my parents were school teachers, and I always imagined myself in the classroom. But then when I was at university, I discovered in my physics degree atmospheric physics, which is really the weather. It's the science of the weather. And I really enjoyed that and decided to join the UK Met Office and become a weather forecaster. And then when I began weather forecasting on TV, then I was actually asked into lots of schools. So I got to do a little bit of teaching, not real teaching, but I got to be in the classroom after all. So I think I made a full circle somehow. Well, I think most people think about weather forecasting as being lots of geography. And while geography is important, there's also loads of science, maths, and computing. So my advice to anyone who wants to be a weather forecaster is that you really should do lots of science and maths to then join the Met Office and get involved in weather forecasting or research into how the climate is changing. The favourite thing about my job, certainly about weather forecasting, is variety, because the weather in Scotland changes almost every day. And then forecasting on TV also brought a lot of real-time excitement. And now I'm involved in education, and what I really enjoy about that is seeing how young people are engaged in the science of climate change and how they're trying very hard to make a difference and really leading the debate when it comes to how we can change our lifestyles and our attitudes to combat what is the biggest challenge to our planet. So that's probably what I enjoy most about what I've done throughout my career. My favourite subjects at school were maths and physics, because I was quite good at them, and I also saw how they helped you understand the world around you. But I also really enjoyed history, because I think history allows you to argue a case, which is really important for science as well, especially today in the 21st century, and science engagement being very important. So maths, physics, but also history. Climate change is impacting the weather all around the world. Temperatures are rising, so we're seeing warmer weather. And here in Scotland, we're also seeing more rainfall, and we're also seeing more intense rainfall events. So I think for us here in Scotland, the main impacts are temperature change and also more rainfall, especially those intense rainfall events during the summer months. Maths is a hugely important subject. Evidence shows if you're good at maths, then you go on to have a good job, a well-paid job. But also maths today underpins so much about our society, really, about computing, about artificial intelligence, about the digital revolution, and also about helping us understand and navigate our way through all the data that politicians use, that journalists use, and all the charts that you see on the news, whether it's fake news or not. It helps you to make informed decisions. That's why maths is so important to us all. I really enjoy my role as a board member at Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. And we see firsthand how climate change is impacting the weather in the park, but also the communities and the nature in the park. One of the big impacts at the moment is rainfall and landslides. We're seeing that at the Rest and Be Thankful, and flooding across the national park, across the country actually, as rivers become big in spate. And that in turn has a knock-on effect for plants and animals' habitat. So how animals are able to live in the woodlands and by the riversides is also impacted by this increasing rainfall. And that's something we at the National Park are very keen to research, to monitor and to protect, to ensure that younger generations are able to enjoy the nature that we've historically been so proud of here in Scotland for generations to come.
Fabulous. A great little introduction there to get any questions that might be coming spurred on. And we're now joined by lovely Heather Reid there. Good afternoon, Heather. How are you?
Hi there, Ross. I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for coming along. Just before everyone gets their questions in, I think we've got some questions coming up firstly from schools in Western Bartonshire, which I know is on the doorstep of Loch Lomond and the Trossachs, where you do a lot of your work. So let's hear from the questions first, if we just kind of go straight into it, if that's okay.
Let's do that.
Excellent. So our first question comes in from Christie Park and Carleaf Primary, and they want to know, what is your favourite type of weather and your least favourite type of weather, and why is that?
Oh, those are great questions, Christy. Absolutely. Well, my favourite type of weather, I like autumn, the season autumn, when you get a little touch of frost in the morning, but it's not too cold. And then you get some nice sunshine that warms things up during the day, and you're able to get out and do what you like to do outside. So I think frost, as long as it's not too severe, doesn't cause any problems on the roads, that's my favourite type of weather, a clear, crisp morning. And my least favourite is, it's probably the wet, windy, especially windy weather. I've got long hair, so windy weather is never a good look. And also, strong winds can cause some real problems, whether it's trees coming down or causing problems to buildings as well, or bridges, disruption on the road network. So, when it's blowing a gale, then I'm never at my happiest, I have to say.
But feeling otherwise okay today, because I don't know if other people that might be watching from around the rest of the UK, it is quite a blustery day in Glasgow, but you're feeling okay otherwise.
It's a bit breezy. I think, you need to be up nearer 40 miles an hour for me to then start to look out the window and think, oh no.
We should see. Excellent stuff. We do have another question. This is from, I think, almost at the headquarters of Loch Lomond in the Trossachs National Park, and that's Balloch Primary, and they are asking, how can weather change so suddenly?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that question, Balloch Primary. And of course, where you sit at the south end of Loch Lomond, then you'll see lots of weather changes in a day. And one of the main reasons for that, and because the weather changes a lot and very suddenly, for a weather forecaster, it's great. I would hate to be a weather forecaster in those sort of Central American states where you get the same weather for 3 months and nothing changes apart from maybe it going up from 30 degrees to 31 degrees Celsius. So I quite like that it changes suddenly. And the main reason for that here in the UK is because we have the Atlantic on one side of us and a landmass, the rest of Europe, on the other side. So most of our weather comes in from the Atlantic, and it picks up lots of moisture weather, lots of rain clouds, and then the rain can deposit itself obviously in the west of Scotland, and where Loch Lomond is in particular, and then it dries out a little bit as it gets further east, so maybe not quite as much rain. But depending on whether the wind's blowing from the north, the west, the east, the south, then we get lots of different types of weather. We can get warm, wet weather, we can get cold, dry weather. And because we get a lot of warm, wet weather in from the west, then that takes the form of showers a lot. So sunshine and showers, it's something I said a huge amount on the television. It's one of the most common weathers that we get in the UK. Warm, and we get sunshine and showers. So that is why it changes so much. It's really our position on the globe.
Also, I suppose, to the different, the biodiversity that we get here in Scotland as well. The weather is also presumably one of the reasons that it's the way it is.
It's because exactly why we have such beautiful landscape, and our rivers, our lochs, our mountains. It's all because of that position in the globe and the climate we get. Yep.
There we go. So positive, pros and cons, I suppose. Let's go. Do we have another question from our schools coming in?
Balach, yeah.
Sorry, it's another question from Balak, which is, what is your prediction of the climate in 10 years? That's probably stretching it a bit if you were to ask to do a weather forecast for 10 years from now, but what's your prediction of the climate?
Yeah, I've not been asked actually to predict the weather 10 years ahead before, so it's a very good, but of course Balak have very correctly said climate, what's the climate in 10 years time. So I think our climate, by all the indications that we have and the science we have, indicates that our climate in 10 years time will be a little bit warmer. And it will also be, I'm afraid, even wetter, especially during the winter months, where in the past 10 years, we've seen a 20% increase in rainfall. And that is like unbelievable. It's unprecedented. If you go back in history and weather, to see that kind of jump in that just 10 years, that is really, really unusual. So I'm hoping that we can slow these changes down a little bit by reducing our carbon dioxide emissions. But at the same time, I think we have to be realistic. And in 10 years' time, everything points to us being a half a degree or a degree warmer, but certainly wetter with more rain, especially during the winter. So it's really important that I'm going to use a big word, that we mitigate, we make changes so that we are able to cope with that sort of increase in rain and those temperature changes, so that our wildlife and our landscapes can cope with it. So I think the first step in that is being knowledgeable and aware, and young people are very knowledgeable and aware. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to mitigate and make changes, but there's no doubt that we're going to be a bit warmer and wetter.
Good stuff. Excellent. Sounds like a lot of work for the next 10 years to get done there as well, to make the changes. Balak Primary, we've got another question from them again, and that is, what is the best thing we can do to help climate change right now? That's nicely kind of feeds into it, actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, absolutely, because it's having that awareness that is so important. So I think in terms of young people, I think young people have been doing a tremendous job in raising awareness about our changing climate, and talking to parents and carers and older family and friends, and joining together in sort of clubs, or whether it's youth parliament, or all at Loch Lomond we also have a young persons committee that's helping me as a board member in our decisions around climate change and how we can help the national park. So I would say get involved in as many of these kind of initiatives as you can. And also, I think, just be really conscious of how you use energy. So, for example, how warm does your home really need to be? Can you knock it down a degree and put on an extra fleece instead? I and my daughter did a little vegan week to see about whether we could make some changes to our diet that would use less energy as well. So I think trying to understand, how we use our energy and how we travel as well. At the moment, obviously, we're not really able to use public transport as much, but we're also not traveling as much full stop. We're not really meant to leave the house unless it's essential. So I think a lot of us have done more cycling, we've done more walking, and it would be really important to keep going with that, and just be much more aware of how we use vehicles in the future as well. So I think young people are probably the best at the moment at being informed, and I would say just keep trying to influence your parents and older people, because we all need to make changes together.
Absolutely, that's a great answer there as well. Lots of different things needed to make that difference. Do we have? Oh, we've got another question in there from Christy Park, and that is, what does the future look like for Scotland due to climate change? Will Scotland end up being underwater if the country keeps flooding?
Well, I think we will see more rainfall, but we're also quite good in Scotland at being very aware of it and trying to make changes. So we've also built some flood prevention schemes, for example, and been really careful that these flood prevention schemes don't use up too much energy even creating them, so that at the end of the day we're actually making a saving, and we're not wasting energy as a result. So I don't think we're going to be underwater. But I do think that we have to be very careful where we build houses and make sure that we're not on floodplains. And I also think that we might not have as much snow. I know that's really weird because we've just had so much snow, but like everything, climate is not just a steady change. There are ups and downs, and what we've had during January, in particular, I suppose into the beginning of February, was a little sort of backward step in terms of what is ultimately overall a warming picture. But we've had a bit of snow, as you know. So I hope you've all enjoyed it, because I think the science is pointing to a little less snow as well. So I think those are going to be the main changes in terms of yes, more rainfall, more water around. But I'm sure we're going to we're going to be able to cope with that. But also look at how we travel around. So, for example, roads that are very prone to landslide, then we, coming down and blocking the road, then we really need to look at alternatives for those as well. So, yeah, I think climate change is changing Scotland's future. But I also think we're quite good at problem solving in Scotland. We've been very good at science over history, and I think we will come up with solutions, especially if the younger generation, continue to be good at science. So yes, some changes, but I don't think we'll see anything so drastic that it's like a sort of disaster movie.
Yeah, everyone's living in different colonies underwater or anything like that. Good,
hopefully not.
Hopefully that, yeah, be a relief for most people to hear, I think. Excellent. So the next question is from Christy Park again, and that is, how far ahead can you forecast the weather?
Oh, that's a good question as well, because when I was in primary school, you certainly didn't rely on the weather forecast even for tomorrow. Whereas now, the Met Office has done a huge amount of scientific research into how to forecast the weather. Also, the Met Office owns one of the largest supercomputers in the world. Massive computer that can do millions and millions and millions of sums in 1 second, so it can keep ahead of the weather. And as a result of all that, then the weather forecast tomorrow is right 84% of the time, which is quite good. If you get 84% in a maths test, I think you're doing well. So 84% accuracy, 85% accuracy in 24 hours is I think quite reliable for tomorrow. The problem occurs when you try and go further ahead, which is exactly what you're asking me. But we're now more accurate. The Met Office is more accurate 4 days ahead today, now in now's forecast, than it used to be sort of 20 years ago, just looking 1 day ahead. So in the last 20 years, weather forecasting has become more accurate. But I would say going a lot beyond 4 days is really, really difficult. There are some weather situations when you've got like a big high pressure sitting over Scotland that can bring dry, cold weather in the winter, warm, sunny weather in the summer. You can go a bit further than that. You know, it's not going to shift for maybe 8 days, and you can sort of reliably say there's going to be a week of same type of weather. But I think at the moment, anything beyond 4 days is getting into the land of make-believe.
So we can trust that 84% of the time we're probably.
Yeah, there you go. But you see, that Ross, everyone remembers whatever 16 times out of 100 it goes wrong.
I'll imagine that's a bugbear for anybody that's working in the Met Office. I'm assuming anyway, just for how often you do manage to get it right. So another question, in from St. Kezogs, and that is, who was someone that inspired you to be a weather forecaster?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you know, I mean, what inspired me to become a weather forecaster was really the weather. I saw the weather as just being this fantastic mix of science, because I always found it quite difficult to choose my favourite subject, or even when I was, in secondary school and then into university, I always found it really tricky to sort of narrow things down. Might be quite a few of you who are like that, actually, and it's not a bad thing to like a lot of subjects and be quite good at a lot of subjects, and find it quite hard to decide this is definitely the one I want to do. So I actually, when I started doing a little bit of atmospheric physics, as I said in the video, I saw that as actually bringing together a bit of chemistry, a bit of maths, a bit of geography. And for me, it became this sort of ideal job where I could bring all of these things I was interested in together. So that's really what inspired me. I mean, I had a fantastic physics teacher at school who inspired me to do physics. And my dad was a big inspiration because he was very into science as well. So I should mention them. But at the same time, it was actually the weather that inspired me to be a forecaster.
Excellent. There we go. Absolutely brilliant. And it's nice to hear that as well, that of course I think people would often not realize how much of an impact, a positive impact, teachers can make in inspiring people to as they go on throughout school and through the rest of their lives as well. We've got another question here from St. Kezogs, which is, what made you want to be an advisor for the government?
Wow. Yes. I just do a little bit of advising, but I've been asked to sit on a few science education committees because we want to continue to make Scottish education one of the best education systems in the world. And as I said, Scotland's always been really, really good at science. If you think back to Alexander Fleming and penicillin, you think back to James Watt and the steam engine, and right up to today, where we've actually contributed hugely to medicine and vaccines, and a lot of science that goes on in the UK today, gravitational waves, quantum technologies, all these sort of really high tech science that we're really, really good at. So what we need to continue to do is inspire young people to get into science and be interested in science. And so that's what made me want to help government to make sure that the curriculum's interesting for young people, and that teachers have all the support they need. So I think it's like continuing Scotland's proud tradition when it comes to the STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, and maths.
Absolutely great answer there as well. Yeah, it must be really interesting to be able to influence government policy as well, just through the passion that you have about the importance of STEM, of course. St. Kezogs, again, I want to ask, what was your dream job? Sorry, I paraphrased that. I'll try again. What was your job before becoming a weather forecaster? What was your job before that?
Well, so I went to university after I'd been at school, and I did science at university. I did a physics degree, and then I did another qualification in meteorology, which kind of got me into the Met Office. But before I joined the Met Office, like a lot of people, I decided I wanted a break from that sort of hard studying, and I took a year off, and I actually worked in Glasgow in a chemistry lab. So I worked analysing soil and water and concrete samples, and it was fascinating, actually. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I earned some money, which I then went with a friend to New Zealand and spent it all. So I travelled around New Zealand for a couple of months and then came back and got a job with the Met Office. So I was lucky enough to be able to do a little bit of travelling, but I did have to work quite hard and earn some money before I went off and did that.
Good stuff. Excellent. There we go. And we've got another question coming in from Carleith Primary, and that is, what inspired you to like science?
That's a great question. You know, I think part of it was I was always, I can't remember a time when I wasn't asking questions. I was a curious child. So from, you know, why is the rainbow in the sky, which is an early memory. I can remember being fascinated by rainbows and rushing outside, you know, in sort of nursery school and primary one, you know, just to see a rainbow, which is quite, yeah, there's obviously something there. So I always quite liked, you know, and asking questions and getting a really sort of scientific answer. And my dad always encouraged that. So I suppose my dad was quite inspirational when it came to science. But I also felt that science gave you the answer to a lot of questions. You know, why is the sky blue? Or why does that toy work like that? You know, how does a motor work? You know, how does the car work? Science answers those questions when you ask them when you're young. So that fascinated me. This subject had answers.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a lot of critical thinking via your dad as well, by the sounds of it, like inspired you to ask questions and that sort of thing.
He was definitely, and he loved the outdoors too. He loved hill walking. He did a lot of fishing, you know, various lochs and rivers across Scotland too. So I was taken outdoors a lot, and I think when you're outdoors, you see a lot of science in action. You know, whether it's the weather, or whether it's, you know, how we use the land, or, you know, rivers running downstream, things like that. So I think the outdoors is a great place to learn more about science.
Absolutely. Our next question comes in from Carleith Primary, which was, what has been the funniest moment of your career? I imagine this might be quite hard to narrow it down, but let's see.
Yeah, I think two spring to mind. You know, one when I was actually forecasting the weather. So this is quite a long time ago, but it was when Scotland voted for our own parliament. So this is a long time ago. And of course, we voted for devolution. We voted for our own parliament. So the news programme that night, Reporting Scotland, decided to come from Carlton Hill in Edinburgh, you know, where you could sort of, where we decided parliament was going to be and everything. And so Jackie Bird, who was presenting the news that evening, she was in a lovely tent, so to speak. You know, she was in a little studio that was all nice and sheltered on the top of the hill. And I was in the studio right up until the last minute, and then I was sent out to do the weather forecast, and I had an umbrella, and it was the most vicious hailstorm you've ever seen. And basically I'm trying to do this weather on this really serious day, and I'm being buffeted about, and absolutely this hail was horrendous and not making it very easy at all. And I look back at that video and I just think, gosh, it's funny. I mean, you know, I handed back to Jackie in her lovely tent, and she was killing herself laughing. So obviously it was quite funny. And then there was another time when I was on Children in Need, and the news team did a funny sort of sketch. That we lost Millport off the weather map, and it was all my fault. And we had to go to Millport and make amends, which involved us putting on a show, and it involved me singing "It's Raining Men," which, and I can't sing to save myself. I don't play any musical instruments. You know, I'm quite good at science, but hey, music, no, not my thing, I'm afraid. I like music, but it's just not, I'm not very good at it. And me singing "It's Raining Men" is quite funny too.
It sounds, I was actually just wondering there, I'm wondering whether any of that footage exists on YouTube, because I know people will be watching it on it just now. They just open a new tab and go straight into that after the video.
It's embarrassing. It's not funny, it's embarrassing.
Okay, that concludes our questions from schools at the moment, Heather. So we're now going to go on to the comments section on YouTube and see what we've got here. So we've got our first question in the comments from Dale Ashman, and Dale asks, what is your favourite thing about science?
Good question, Dale, because it allows me to, tell everybody how important science is, which is what part of my job these days. And so I think my favorite thing about science is, it helps us solve problems. And when you think about some of the big problems facing our world at the moment, whether it's climate change, whether it's, sadly, the pandemic, which hopefully we're going to be able to come out of because of science, because of vaccines, and because of understanding the data and putting in place systems that will allow us to try and get back to a normal life. Science has played a huge role there. But other things like, safe drinking water in the developing world, it's science that's going to help with that. And just, again, coming up with some solutions for how we travel around our country and our world without damaging it. That's science. So I think my favorite thing about science is that it helps us solve some of the big problems that we have in the world, some of the smaller problems, as well. But science, when you think about mobile phones, or you think about the fact that lockdown has been really, really tough, but without science and technology, it would have been even worse. It would have been just horrendous not being able to, speak to my mum using FaceTime, for example, and things like that. So there's a huge amount to thank science for. I know we don't get it right all the time, and it can cause some problems as well, but I think the good things outweigh the bad.
That's a great answer and great points made there as well, I think, as well. I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you on many of the points you made there. Our next question comes in from Kate McDowell, and Kate asks, how long have you been in your job?
Well, Kate, you're just making me feel old now. But I started weather forecasting young, and I was weather forecasting and working with the BBC for about 16 years. And for the last 10, 11 years, I have been working with a range of different partners around science engagement in particular. So I do some work with schools and local authorities. I do some work, as we've been discussing, with the National Park. I do some work with the Scottish Government. And I also do some work from universities and for industry, trying to get young people interested in science with them as well. So, so although I no longer forecast the weather, my job is still very varied. And I'm also mum to a 16-year-old daughter who's going to be trying to set, hires in this sort of challenging world at the moment as well. So that's an important job too.
Good stuff. Yeah, it must be quite tricky at this time. I'm sure it is for a lot of pupils at the moment trying to navigate.
I feel for you all, absolutely.
Yeah. Our next question comes in from Amy, and Amy, sorry, I'm just trying to read that there. It's Leah from Carleaf Primary, and she's asking, how often has climate changed dramatically? So I suppose would it be climate events, or would that be maybe?
Yeah. I think so. I think what Leah's trying to maybe, get at there is that we have seen big changes in our climate here, on our planet in the past, whether it's little ice ages, or whether it's been quite warm spells in our sort of geological past as well, going up to, sort of when humans were first on the planet, and then beyond that as well. And I think, climate scientists and who I've worked with, will tell you that most of those dramatic climate changes can be explained through other quite major events that happened at the time. So, for example, the way the sun, the way our planet orbits the sun, and the tilt of our planet as well, and if on a scale of tens of thousands of years, that changes, and when that happens, then we can see changes in our climate. Also, huge volcanic eruptions can also cause quite dramatic climate change as well, and that's even happened in our sort of more recent past, when there's been a big volcanic eruption, depending on where the volcano is. Quite often, if it's near the equator, so for example, Mount Pinatubo in Philippines, when it erupted, it sent a huge amount of ash into the atmosphere, which then travelled right around the atmosphere and had a cooling effect for a good 2 or 3 years. So when you've had sort of very volcanic periods in our geological history, then that has had a dramatic impact on our climate. But I think what separates this climate change that we're talking about and really concerned about at the moment is that it's something we've done to our planet. It's, human-made change because of the carbon dioxide emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere through our sort of energy use. So we're kind of quite clear on the science on this one as well. And we also know what we need to do to try and stop it changing dramatically.
Stuff. Excellent. When you were talking about volcanoes there, Heather, I remembered back to, I'm not even going to try to pronounce its name, but the one in Iceland a few years ago that erupted and caused a bit of, I think it was mostly disruption to air travel, but by the by. Our next question coming in. Our next question is from Alda, or Alda, I don't know if I'm saying that right, there we go. And the question is, what's your favourite animal and what's your favourite colour?
Oh, good questions.
Sorry.
Good questions. Well, my favourite animal is a giraffe. Not 100% sure why that is, but I've always liked a giraffe. I just think it looks really elegant with the long neck. So, I don't know if you've been to the safari park and seen the giraffes there. What's the safari park called again? Blue Drummond. That's it. No, I was thinking, my daughter's now 16, so we don't go quite as often as we used to, but they've got some beautiful giraffes there. And my favourite colour is blue, like the sky.
There we go. Perfect. There we go. Hope that answered your question there, Anna. We've got another question coming in from Lucas McNally, age 9. And Lucas wants to know, what subjects are good to study at school to become involved in weather forecasting?
Great question, Lucas. Hope you're interested in getting involved in weather, meteorology, climate. There's lots of ways you can really make a difference getting involved in weather forecasting. And I think one of the most important subjects to study is definitely science, because what forecasting the weather is all about is it's about predicting how the atmosphere is going to change with respect to time. So that's that's a proper definition. Okay, so it's how weather will change with respect to time and these sort of day-to-day variations in the atmosphere. And the atmosphere there's a lot of science in there. There's a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics. So science is important. Math is important because it's how weather changes over time. So we're going to start using some computers and maths. And I think geography is important as well, so that you get a sense of the landscape and the sort of impact that can have. So for example, when weather's coming in from the west, then if you're living in Fort William on the west coast of Scotland, right up towards Ullapool, you get quite a lot of rain. But if you're living on the East Highlands, if you're watching this in Inverness, you'll know that actually you don't get nearly as much rain. It dries out. So there's a lot of geography involved in that sort of understanding the role the mountains play. So I would say science, maths, computing and geography. Those are the ones that a combination of those will stand you in good stead.
Good stuff. Lots of different subjects that are important, obviously, there. We've got another question coming in, I think, we do. This is from Leah and Carly Fremley. I've got it right this time now. That is, how many hours do weather reporters have to work a day?
That's a great question. Well, so it depends. I mean, some weather reporters will get a lot of information from weather forecasters, and then will maybe work on other news stories during the day. But then there are weather reporters who work for the Met Office and who are actually forecasting the weather as well. So I kind of fell into that category. So I actually did a lot of the actual looking at the charts and speaking to colleagues. It's real teamwork. Lots of communication goes on in producing a weather forecast. You know how you do some teamwork at school and you work in groups? That's exactly what you do as weather forecasters as well. So it's really good training to do lots of group work and give everybody different jobs and then come up with a good outcome, a good answer, good project. So when I was working, I used to start work about 9 o'clock in the morning, and then obviously I would finish just about 7 o'clock in the evening. It was quite a long day, but then some weeks I maybe just worked 4 days rather than 5 days. So you work a longer day, but maybe not quite as many, which is good. A long weekend.
Yeah, lots and lots of stuff there. I think we've got one more question coming in from the comments just now for you, Heather, and that is from Nathan Cameron, and he wants to know, I think you were talking about rainbows earlier, he wants to know, how do you make a rainbow?
Well, that's a great question, and there's some really good science in rainbows, because when you see daylight, when you see the light that comes into our atmosphere and our daytime, then it's like white light from the sun. It's kind of it's not a specific color, isn't it? It's not like the whole world is suddenly a blue light bulb. It's like clear. But actually, that clear light, that white light, is made up of lots of different colors. It's made up of all the colors of the rainbow, all the colors of the visible spectrum. And the way that that you get to see all those colors is when that light hits a water droplet. So that's why you get a rainbow when it's raining, or there's a shower and there's some sunshine as well in the sky. Because what happens to that light is when it hits the water droplet, then all the different colors that are kind of all sitting really, really closely together in white light get scattered out into all the different types of light that make up the white. So you can actually make a rainbow using a torch and using some water and a mirror, actually, as a sort of kitchen science experiment. So if you look up on the internet how to make a rainbow in the kitchen, then you should be able to get a little kitchen experiment that you should be able to use, like a basin of water, a mirror, or maybe a bit of tin foil and a torch, and you should be able to get some what we call refraction of the water, so sort of scatter all that white light out. But they're beautiful. I think they're absolutely beautiful, especially when you can see more than one, which again is quite complicated science, but it's all about that sort of white light being bounced about in water so that it can scatter into all the different colors that really make it up.
Wow, what a great, yeah, I can already visualize people at home probably trying to source mirrors and torches and probably soaking their kitchen in the process now as well, which hopefully we
can the light off.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, switch the light off, use the torch. We're actually starting to come towards the end of the session for today. Heather, thank you so much for your time so far. One question that I did want to ask, which I don't think anyone's mentioned yet, was we often talk about, especially with COP26 coming up, we talk about obviously the work that you did forecasting with the Met Office, with the weather, and then we talk about the climate, and often the two get a little bit mixed up, but they are different. Could you explain to us a little bit about what the differences are between weather and climate?
And climate. No, it's a great question, actually, and it's something I normally try and do right at the beginning of a talk, because it's really important that we understand the difference, because weather is what you see out the window. Weather is what you get in a day, whereas climate is over a much longer period of time. So when we're working in weather forecasting and we're talking about climate change, then we're actually looking at all that added up weather, all those days over like a 30-year period. So normally when we're talking about climate, we're talking about a 30-year chunk of time and the sort of average weather in that 30 years. So the reason we can go on to maybe the television and talk about temperatures in July being around average 18 degrees Celsius tomorrow, or 19 degrees Celsius, is because over the last 30 years, that's what the temperature on average is. There may be some days when in July you're sitting there and it's only 14 and you're cold, and there may be other days when it's like 25 and it's a heat wave. But on average, so when you smooth it all out over a big period of time, like 30 years, then the average July temperature is around 18.5, 19 degrees. So climate changes much more slowly. So it irons out all those little, sort of peaks and troughs that you get in Scotland to get an average of the weather over a much longer period of time. But weather, as someone asked earlier, can change very suddenly, and we can get all 4 seasons in one day. And that's what makes Scotland, I think, such a wonderful country and great climate. But climate is like an average of all that weather over a much longer period of time.
Thank you very much, Heather. That's a great explanation. Hopefully a lot of people took a lot from that as well. And it's certainly made it a bit clearer in my mind as well. That actually brings us towards the end of our Q&A already. It feels like it's flown in.
I know, it has.
Where's the time gone? But I just want to say thank you very much for your time today, Heather. I know that this probably won't be the last we'll hear from you, especially with the Science Centre being so involved with COP26 later on this year, like we've been mentioning. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much to all of you tuning in as well for all of your great questions, especially from our schools in Western Bartonshire and from the comment section on YouTube as well. We hope to see you again in Glasgow Science Centre in person, hopefully in the near future. If you did enjoy today's video, it will be available for the run up into COP26, and you'll be able to access it and rewatch it as many times as you like. But apart from that, that concludes our Q&A session for today. So thank you very much again, everyone. Thank you, Heather. I'll let you get back to the rest of your day just now, but thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you later.
Thank you very much. Bye.